Oh, I need my lip balm. I'm not doing a video with chapped lips. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited that I'm actually kind of committing to this. I know it's only 2 videos, but we're committing to it in a way. Welcome back to my channel. I thought, why not do a January reading wrap up? I read 3 books this month, which I know seems like not that much, but I thought it would be fun to delve a little bit deeper into each book that I read and just to talk about them a little bit more elaborately in comparison to the 2024 reading wrap up where I kind of just kept things very surface level. But I read 3 books and we have a lot of time so we can sit here and dissect them and talk about them a little bit more deeper. So where I'm at with this channel, I, honest to God, loved filming that last video where I ranked every single book I read in 2024. I had so much fun talking about the books that I read. I love talking about books. I love reading books, obviously. And I thought, why don't I mix my love for reading with my love for making content and make book content in a way? This is more of a passion project. This is also a way for me to document my reading and to keep track of my New Year's resolution, which was to engage further with my books that I'm reading. With every book I read, I keep pretty extensive notes, and I'm kind of extending that further by making these videos. I think once a month or so, I'm going to be doing a reading wrap up, but also I think I'm going to stick some extra book videos in there as well. But I'm very excited to see where this goes. It's truly a passion project for me. I love doing this. I love talking about it. I also loved the comment section on the last video. I have so much fun discussing books online as well. I really want to make these comment sections on each of these videos to be a discussion, kind of like a book club, to talk about either the books that I'm reading or books that you recommend or just anything book related. But the discussion was so amazing and I will make it a priority to respond to the comments and kind of create a fun bookish environment. So what you all probably came here for was my books that I read in January. So with me only reading 3 books, I think I actually have quite a variety of books despite the low book count. I have a nonfiction memoir, which obviously is nonfiction, right? I have a romance and I have a literary fiction. So the first book I read this month was The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. The romance was Beach Read by Emily Henry. And the memoir was Shari Franke's The House of My Mother. So without further ado, let's dive in. Let's dive in. That was so stupid, but anyway. Okay, so we're gonna start with The House of My Mother by Shari Franke. So as I said, this is the memoir that I read this month. For those of you who don't know who Shari Franke is, she is the eldest daughter of the 8 Passengers family. If you don't know who the 8 Passengers family is, they are, or were, a vlog family on YouTube. They appear to be this kind of perfect all-American family, but a couple of years back, the mother got arrested for... I don't know if I can say it on here. Yeah. It was really bad. It was a really bad case. And so I actually would watch this family whenever they were active. So to see that news was absolutely mind-boggling. Anyway, so within this book, Shari outlines quite a lot of things and accounts from her life. Firstly, she talks about the disconnect emotionally that she felt from her mother from a very young age. And then she started talking about what it was like to be a child in a family vlogging atmosphere. And then she discusses how her mom ultimately joined a cult and led to complete catastrophe within her family. This book was absolutely insane to read. I would first like to outline that I think Shari Franke is 21 or 22 years old. So she's right around my age. And the way that she wrote in this book was so incredible. Her writing abilities are very strong. And the biggest takeaway for me in this book was I feel like my perspective on family vlogging has really shifted. I grew up watching a lot of family vloggers and I've always kind of been captivated by that content, but this book really swayed my opinion on that. It made me realize that sometimes in family vloggers, okay, this lip balm's really making me trip on my words. Family vloggers sometimes, and I'm not gonna blanket statement this, some family vloggers do things solely for the camera. And this was very much the case for the 8 Passengers family. And it's sad that things like birthdays and holidays become commodifiable to their audience instead of the parents partaking in those holidays and festivities out of love for their kids. There's one line I want to refer to, page 42. Family vlogs in particular struck a chord, transforming kitchen tables and living rooms into stages for a new kind of reality show. The most adept of these digital storytellers found themselves at the helm of a peculiar new industry. They were turning bedtime stories and first steps into ad revenue and sponsorship deals, blurring the lines between intimate family moments and marketable content. It was a brave new world where a camera-ready smile and a knack for wholesome narrative could transmute domestic life into a lucrative enterprise. So that line in particular is kind of one of the theses of the book, and it really transformed my thinking on that topic. Obviously, though, this is a very extreme case, but it makes me sympathize more with other children within vlogging families, and then also children who were on reality TV, children that had to grow up in the spotlight without having the ability to make that decision for themselves. This book also dives into generational trauma as well as some religious trauma and personal trauma that Shari went through in her life. And the vulnerability that she showed in this book, I just have so much respect for her, and I just think that Shari is an incredible person. Shari also discussed the emotional economy, and this opened my eyes up to another issue that I feel like is really present in today's society, and that is the idea of the emotional economy. And it's the idea that we are constantly waiting for the next news scandal and the next crazy story like this. But we fail to acknowledge the hurt and the grief and the suffering that these people went through. And I think that slowly we're becoming more and more desensitized to situations like these, and it turns into a monetizable story instead of actually sympathizing with the victims. I thought that this book was really, really well done. I don't rate memoirs, but I would highly recommend this book. And I truly, truly hope that Shari can live a peaceful, happy life after all of the events that went on. And the same goes for the rest of the Franke kids. The next book I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. So this is the third Emily Henry book that I have read. I've read Book Lovers, which I was not a fan of, and Happy Place, which I enjoyed. And Beach Read, I enjoyed. Probably to the same amount that I enjoyed Happy Place. So Beach Read is about two authors. One is named January, and she writes romance novels. And Gus, who writes literary fiction, but very dark fiction. They both went to college together and they kind of hated each other, but they did have a moment where they kind of were dancing together in a frat basement, but nothing came out of that. Fast forward, January finds out that her father, who passed away, had a mistress the whole time, and he gave her as inheritance the keys to her beach house. She moves into said beach house, and guess who lives next door? Gus. So as I said, January writes romance, Gus writes literary fiction. And so their philosophies are quite lined up with the genres that they write. January is a big believer in happy endings, whereas Gus is a little bit more pessimistic on his life's outlook due to a lot of trauma on his end. So they strike a deal to get each other out of their writing blocks. And so that includes going on dates, doing fun activities, but also doing more grave activities. So I enjoyed this book. I thought it was really well done. I definitely understand why Emily Henry has the fan base that she has. Her romance books are very unique. I find them to be a little bit more deeper, and they touch on more grave subjects in her books. And I think out of the three of her books that I've read, this one was the most serious and most deep. Something I loved about this book was the commentary on romance and women's fiction as genres. I think in my life and the reading world in general, people seem to discount those genres, and it actually bothers me a lot. I think that romance and women's fiction are very important genres. It bothers me when people discount them as like, oh, they're just a beach read. Oh, those books are so stupid. They're so fluffy. They're chick, da, 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 da. It really bothers me because I think that there's a lot of value to those books and their valid life experiences, particularly about women and their experiences. Let me point out this one quote that talks about that issue. I know how to tell a story, Gus, and I know how to string a sentence together. If you swapped out all my Jessicas for Johns, do you know what you'd get? Fiction. Just fiction. Ready and willing to be read by anyone, but somehow by being a woman who writes about women, I've eliminated half the Earth's population from my potential readers, and you know what? I don't feel ashamed of that. I feel pissed that people like you will assume my books couldn't possibly be worth your time, while meanwhile you could on live TV and the New York Times would praise your bold display of humanity. So that quote, I think, is great commentary on this issue, and I'm a big proponent of that. I think Gus and January had great chemistry, and the ending tied up so neatly. And towards the end, there's a scene that really made me sob real tears, and I feel like it's kind of rare for me to cry real tears over books, but gosh, it got me. My only issue is that it felt a little bit redundant at times. However, what I will say is this book, I feel like, is more of a character study than a plot-driven novel, although the plot is pretty good. I think there's a lot to look at in terms of character, but for me personally, I found the character side of it to be a little bit redundant, and she kept trying to drill in points that I feel like I already grasped halfway into the novel. As well, they're both writing books within the book, so the plot of January's book that she was writing was kind of confusing to me, and it's only brought up maybe 4 or 5 times, so you kind of forget about it, and then when you're reading it, you're like, wait, what's happening? So that was a little bit confusing to me. I'd like to also highlight 2 quotes that I just really liked. This one's on page 226. Happy. Not giddy or overjoyed, but that low, steady level of happiness that in the best periods of life rides underneath everything else, a buffer between you and the world you are walking over. I just think that's so pretty, and I think it's such a great way to describe what true happiness feels like. And now this quote, which is on page 354, the sky had darkened to a brutal blue. Seeing that color on someone's skin would make your stomach turn. It was gorgeous in this context. Strange how things could be repellent in some situations and incredible in others. Again, a really beautiful quote. I just love that type of writing. So my rating for Beach Read by Emily Henry is 4 stars. I enjoyed this book. I thought it was great. And again, I would recommend it if you prefer character studies over a more plot-driven novel. I will be honest though, it was leaning a little bit more towards a 3-star until I got to the ending and things just wrapped up really cleanly. So this was a decent 4-star novel and I'm happy that I read it. And the last book that I read this month, this mammoth. It doesn't look like a mammoth, but I'll explain. The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. Y'all. Bruh. I have to give an overview, not that it matters, because you'll see, about this book before I dive into all of my qualms about it. So this book is about a family in Alexandria, Mississippi. And 12 years prior to this book's setting, the eldest son of this one family was found dead in their yard. And 12 years later, which is when the book takes place, the youngest daughter of that family is very precocious, very smart, and she wants to crack the case and figure out why and how her brother died. So she dedicates the entire summer to figuring this out, and where that goes, I'll explain a little bit later. You guys, this book went on and 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 on. Oh my gosh. This book is 624 pages and I'm going to show you what each page looks like. It's a lot of words on each page. And it's one of those books where you actually have to pay attention to every word. You can't really skim because you might lose out on a detail that matters later down the line. So the plot that I explained to you, this book kind of just derails from that plot and just goes a whole different route. And for the ending that it yielded, I feel like there needed to be a better reward for the amount of effort and stamina that I put into this book. This book requires so much stamina, you guys. It was insane. Okay, the thing is, personally, I felt like I had to finish this book before I left for my trip to Miami. So I made this schedule to make sure that I finished it before then because otherwise I would have never finished it. And so by this point, it was like 45 pages a day, which still took like an hour and a half each day because you have to read this book so slowly and carefully. Again, it was so monotonous and some scenes just took way too long. It's like 20 pages to describe her going down to the local pool and talking to the lifeguard about Jack, about nothing. Oh, it was so frustrating. And there were a lot of characters to keep track of. And to the author's credit, you had a really good idea of who each character was and what their motives were and who they kind of were. But again, it was just so overly descriptive. And I do like over description in some contexts, but when it's the entire book, it's like, oh my gosh, if this book shed 200 pages of that over description, I feel like it could have been a bit better. Honestly, quite a bit better. But I've been complaining about this a lot, but I will point out some positives. There were some really cool references in this book. The main character, Harriet, is really inspired by figures like Captain Scott and Houdini. It was cool to read about those figures from a child's perspective because Harriet is 12 years old, or 12 years old. I think the family dynamic was really interesting as well. Harriet is this 12-year-old girl, the youngest daughter out of 2, I guess. Yeah. And her mom is kind of negligent, and the entire extended family still hasn't recovered from the oldest son's death 12 years ago. So there's a lot of just weird dynamics going on with the family, which I enjoyed reading about. Harriet's grandmother was an interesting character as well as her great aunts. There were 3 that that were present throughout the novel as well. And Harriet's sidekick, Healy, a really kind of immature kid, impulsive, and he kind of wasn't your typical sidekick that you read about in these types of books. I also enjoyed the atmosphere. The pro of the over description is that I really liked reading about the vegetation and the wildlife in Mississippi, as well as some of the architectural styles. For setting, I'll read this quote to kind of describe what the setting is like. Alexandria, flat and desolate, a circuit of repeating street signs, a giant train set. The sense of unreality was what got you after a while. Airless streets, colorless skies. Buildings empty, only pasteboard and sham. And if you drive long enough, you always end up right back where you started. And this is on pages 444 to 445. So passages like that I enjoyed because, as you guys know, I love setting and I love when an author taps into the setting. I also thought that this book is decent education on inequalities at the time in the 70s. There were some really great quotes in this book. However, there was an excessive use of slurs that I didn't feel were necessary. But one of the quotes that I did like, it's one law for the weak and another for the strong. So there is some good insight on inequalities. However, at times it set you back. So I'm kind of conflicted on that. And so my official rating for The Little Friend by Donna Tartt is 2 stars. Again, it was just so long and I feel like the ending was not a great payout for the amount of work that I put into this book. However, it earned that 1 star because of the setting and because of the way she wrote about some of the family dynamics, which I found is really interesting. Otherwise, I wouldn't really recommend this book. This is probably the worst Southern Gothic that I've read so far. Not really a fan, and I would urge you a lot of trigger warnings before reading this book, but I wouldn't even recommend it to you to begin with. So these are the 3 books that I read this month. I'd say it was a pretty decent reading month. I enjoyed Beach Read and The House of My Mother. These were both good reads, but this book took up half of my month and I was really eager to move on to the next book the entire time. So I feel like I could have read more, but again, that's not the point of reading. It's more about delving into these books and not just trying to reach a number. But let me know what you think about these books if you have read them, or if you feel like you know certain books that are similar that you'd like to recommend to myself and the other commenters. Let me know. We're gonna make the comment section a little book club. I also wrote pretty extensive reviews for these books on my Goodreads, which I'm gonna have linked below. So if you wanna check those out, feel free. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know what other types of book content you guys wanna see. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to think about posting more book content on here. This will be our little like nook. It's for those who know who know. But I love you guys so much. If you stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. And thank you so much. I hope you guys have an amazing February. Love you guys.